from ABC News. This Week with David Brinkley. Now from our Washington headquarters, here's David Brinkley.
Bulldozers cut a hole through the Berlin Wall, and border guards standing on the two sides reached through the opening between East and West and shook hands. People standing and watching this shouted, sang, laughed, and cried. It was a moment in history. So where does the Western world go from here? There are maybe 100 questions, and we'll put some of them to today's guests. The U.S. Secretary of State, James A. Baker, and Vitaly Churkin, advisor to the Soviet Union's foreign ministry. Some background from our man Jack Smith, some comments from Peter Jennings at the wall, and our discussion here with George Will, Sam Donaldson, and Tom Wicker, all here on our Sunday program. First, a little news since the Sunday morning papers. Today, Sunday, the mayors of East and West Berlin met in one of the new openings in the wall, reached through, and shook hands. And it was a symbolic gesture of great emotional power. Before this, about 1 million Germans from the East poured into the West, marveling at the stores full of food, clothes, stereos, and goods seldom seen in the East. Here's ABC's Jerry King in Berlin.
The celebrations have gone on around the clock. This was the scene in the early hours of this morning as East German workers continued opening up the Berlin Wall. And this morning, the mayors of the eastern and of the western sectors got together at one new crossing point to work on détente. But their people are well ahead of them. East has been meeting West again today, and they both like it.
It's a wonderful day. This Potsdamer Platz, one of the heart of the old Berlin, that is open again. It makes us proud, and we are happy about it.
This East German family drove half the night to get to West Berlin and to spend a few hours sightseeing and shopping. But both were almost impossible. The sheer size of the crowds in the streets made it difficult to move around. And this being Sunday, there were only a few stores open for business. But there was a lesson in freedom. When a small group of Maoist revolutionaries staged a protest, at first the East Germans merely listened quietly until they realized there was free speech here, and they exercised that right. Another new experience to take back to the communist world. Jerry King, ABC News, West Berlin.
ABC's Peter Jennings has been in Berlin for several days now watching all of this take place and is standing by there now. Peter, tell us what's happening there at this moment.
Well, David, I think to sum it up, I think we're watching the European continent change before our eyes. You mentioned 1 million people come to West Berlin. They came yesterday. They estimate that by the time this weekend of freedom is over, 3 million people will have come across the entire frontier between East Germany and West. Let's take another look, if you've got a moment, at that scene at the Potsdamer Platz that Jerry King had in his report. This is the center of the old Berlin. This is where in 1953 East Germans rose up against Soviet occupation, where in 1961 they laid the first barbed wire. So the emotional impact of cutting a hole in the wall at that location is overwhelming. And everywhere you go along the wall, at all the new openings, people stream through with this same intensity. Those flowers arrived from Holland because some florists in Holland were sitting around and said, we've got to do something. So they got in a truck with 20,000 bouquets, and they drove down here to Berlin, and they haven't got nearly enough flowers. Everybody's been chipping away at the wall all along there. You find all sorts of freelancers trying to get their own piece of the wall down. And the sense of freedom is very much the same. You can't see it quite from that view of the Potsdamer Platz. Is very much the same on the eastern side of the wall. We spent all day yesterday on the eastern side, and it's quite stunning that only 4 weeks after we were here last time, you can actually talk to soldiers on the other side who say the wall has been too long in coming down.
Peter, are the people streaming through still staying long enough to shop, look around, and then going home?
Well, you mentioned people going to take a look at all the goods that are available here. You know, West Berlin, as you well know, David, was almost calculatingly designed to stick it in the communist world's eye. It's the great consumer paradise. And downtown Berlin today looks like downtown Beijing or downtown Shanghai. There are tens of thousands of people on the street. And the great irony here, David, is that while all these people have come across, all been given 100 marks, about $50 by the West German government. Do you know they can't afford what is in the West German shops? They'll all go home for the most part at the end of the day or at the end of the weekend. Of the estimated 3 million people who've come over the weekend, only apparently about 9,000 have asked to stay in West Germany for good. But in those shopping scenes, I think, are some real seeds of trouble for the future, because East Germans will think in time of what they've seen this weekend and realize with great weight that they aren't able to afford the kind of life that their brothers and sisters live on this side of the wall, even when it's open.
Peter, it was very interesting and touching to hear that I hadn't heard before, that the Dutch decided they had to do something, and so they sent flowers, which of course they produce in great quantities. In a few minutes, we'll have the Secretary of State here, and we might ask him what we might do. Any suggestions?
Well, I can tell you this much. There are a lot of Americans here, of course, stationed in West Germany and stationed in Berlin. We're in the American sector, and Potsdamer Platz this morning was in the British sector. I think there's a real sense here that the United States is a little behind the curve on this, a little behind the curve to this extent. The president didn't seem very enthusiastic when he called in the press the other day, and people here wonder why. I said at the outset, we're watching Europe change. America's still a great ideal of democracy, but I think there is a little bit of feeling here that we're not quite up with the speed of events.
What might we do? Any ideas? It's a tough question, I know, and no one here
it's a tough call for anybody.
Really knows the answer. Go ahead.
I suppose if you ask me for an answer, I'd say leave it in the hands of the Germans. West Germany is the most powerful and influential nation in Europe. I'm not sure that in the long run it is our place to be telling Germans either east or west about their future.
Thank you, Peter. Thanks very much.
Thanks, David.
And we have a report today in the Washington Post that the Soviet Union has slowed down, has cut back its spending on modernizing nuclear weapons. Perhaps because, it is said, perhaps because it is tight for money and expects an arms reduction treaty with the United States soon. We'll ask today's guests about this, and we'll be back with all the rest of today's program in a moment. Mikhail Gorbachev says now that the Russians will not send their tanks into other countries as they have done in the past, in Hungary, Czechoslovakia, and East Germany. And so far that's what he says, and so far it seems it means it. Before we explore all of this with today's guests, here's a background report from Jack Smith, who is in Berlin. Jack?
David, Berliners are glorying in newfound freedom. For the last 3 days, hundreds of thousands of East Germans have been pouring over the wall and through crossing points. West Germans hacked away at the wall, in one place actually knocking part of it down, while East German workers began lifting out sections of it for additional crossings to accommodate the crush. East German border guards, who a week ago would have shot anyone crossing, stood and watched. East Germans were welcomed to the West with free maps, free meals for young and old alike, and paid 100 Deutschmarks, about $50, in one-time welcome money given by the West German government. The vast majority don't appear to be staying, though, merely crossing to gawk at the life denied them for so long. East Germany's decision to open its border is historic. The West German parliament, when it heard the news, rose and sang the national anthem. Elsewhere in the West, there was quiet jubilation.
I think it's the most dramatic event in East-West relations since the end of the war.
Erected by East Germany in 1961 to keep its citizens locked in, the Berlin Wall became the leading symbol of the Cold War. Several thousand East Germans escaped. Nearly 200 died trying.
The opening of the border here 3 days ago capped a week of extraordinary shifts in East German policy, as the Communist Party there struggled to keep popular discontent from exploding.
East Germany's new party boss, Egon Krenz, has been in power for less than a month, and there have been almost daily mass demonstrations in East Germany for democratic change, and the mass exodus of East Germans, some 200,000 so far this year, 1% of the population, has shown no sign of stopping either. It's aggravating an already severe labor shortage in the East, and even the West Germans are grumbling they can take no more.
300 an hour coming in. Young people, people with children, needing housing. It's a potentially a major crisis for the West Germans.
In 1953, a workers' rising in East Germany was bloodily suppressed by Soviet troops and tanks. But Mikhail Gorbachev in East Germany a month ago said Soviet intervention in the East Bloc was now a thing of the past.
The important thing to keep in mind here is the Soviet unwillingness to protect unpopular regimes in Eastern Europe. This is the key to what is happening in Eastern Europe today.
And the key to East Germany's dizzying scramble this week to keep up with public demands for reform. The cabinet and the ruling Politburo reshuffled, free elections promised, and opposition parties legalized, now open borders. Friday night, party boss Krenz told East Germans he was leading a revolution and pleaded with them to stay and help.
His trick is to make just enough concessions to defuse things without making them so incrementally that each concession only augments the demand for more.
The situation here is fraught with danger. East Germany is the Warsaw Pact frontline state and vital to Soviet security. And unlike the recent reforms engineered by Poland and Hungary, change in East Germany is being driven by the people and could spin out of control. Soviet intervention is not inconceivable.
The Soviet Union is watching developments in Eastern Europe with considerable concern, but I believe that their main concern is the pace of developments.
Significantly, Gorbachev Friday sent President Bush a message stressing support for East Germany's open border, but he expressed the hope that the situation will remain calm and peaceful. And there's another wild card, German reunification. Once a slogan, it's now being openly talked about.
For Berlin.
West German Chancellor Helmut Kohl told a rally in West Berlin that East and West Germany are one nation and belong together. But Germany's neighbors have not forgotten 2 world wars.
I think while they're separated, we'll have no more wars. But once they get together again, God help us later on in life.
The idea was rejected by Moscow.
Because politically, it's not the time now to talk about reunification.
And it isn't popular with the Allies either.
I think you're going much too fast. Much too fast. You have to take these things step by step and handle them very wisely.
Neither NATO nor the Warsaw Pact is ready for reunification. It would only be feasible if the 2 Germanys were substantially demilitarized and neutral.
As with everything that's happened here this week, policy and the statesmen who make it on both sides of this crumbling Iron Curtain have not yet caught up with events here in Germany. David?
Jack, thank you. We had hoped and expected next to talk to Ottfried Henning, who is West Germany's Deputy Secretary for East Germany, but there is some problem at that end with the satellite, and so I regret at the moment we cannot reach him. So, coming next, Vitaly Churkin, who is an advisor to the Soviet Foreign Ministry from Moscow, and shortly, the U.S. Secretary of State, James A. Baker, III, from Washington. In a moment. Mr. Churkin in Moscow, thank you very much for being with us today. Pleased to have you. Here in the studio with us are George Will and Sam Donaldson, both of ABC News. Now, Mr. Churkin, all of us here, and I suppose people around the world, have been stunned by the events in East and West Germany. What is the Soviet Union's thinking on what is happening there?
Well, our attitude to it is very positive because it is, of course, a very dramatic move by the new leadership of the German Democratic Republic, and it does show, we feel, that they are in control and that they mean what they say when they talk about their plans to undertake major reforms which are necessary, they feel, in that country.
Well, explain to us, if you will, why in this case, unlike a previous case in East Germany, the Soviet Union left it alone, let it run on, take its course. What's happened?
I don't quite understand what you mean by the previous case. If you mean things which happened several decades ago, then the answer is obvious. Now there is a very different situation in the world, a very different policy which is being pursued by the Soviet Union, so everything is different. And the basic principle of our foreign policy is that of the freedom of choice. And it, of course, applies also to our allies in Eastern Europe. If people there feel that they need to have change, then it will be change. And this is our basic attitude.
Mr. Churkin, on the principle of freedom of choice, the people of the East seem to be choosing
for closer relations with the West, and indeed the rationale for two Germanys seems to have collapsed, the original rationale being that there were two radically opposed systems going to be tried there. How does the Soviet Union feel about German reunification, the Soviet Union having suffered more, I suppose, than any nation ever from a united Germany?
I'm afraid I cannot follow all the fine points, the fine print in your question. There are some problems with the sound, but I do get the gist of it. We feel that German reunification is not a good idea now at all, that it is an idea which is destabilizing and which is going to hurt all the positive processes which we now all see happening in Europe. We are engaged in building the common European home, and that would include, of course, much greater contact and relationship between the Federal Republic of Germany and the German Democratic Republic, between all European states. We feel that it is important not to jeopardize that positive process.
Okay, your position is then that it is at least premature to be talking about German unification. However, events seem to be spinning out of anyone's control. Suppose, in accordance with the principle of free choice, the Germans choose unification. What would the Soviet policy be toward that choice?
Well, as I say, we feel that European stability is very important, and we feel that at this point people in the German Democratic Republic, and I guess also in the Federal Republic of Germany, at least the majority of them, feel that it is best not even to raise that issue, because it entails too many things. You will recall that whenever they start talking about German reunification, immediately the questions of the borders come up, because of course the official policy of the Federal Republic is that the Federal Republic does recognize the current European borders, but the United Germany, when it is formed, will not recognize the current borders. So very many dangerous problems are lurking over there, and it's best not to raise them.
Forgive me.
It's best to...
Yes, just
okay.
but address this possibility. Suppose that a reorganized East German polity decides that it wants unification with West Germany. What will the Soviet Union do about that?
Well, let's first try to handle the situation which we all on both sides, I mean in the West and in the East, have now. And what we have now is very many positive things happening in the German Democratic Republic and in Europe as the whole. So let's take that situation and let's try to achieve the best results we can from working from that situation.
After World War II, Stalin set up a number of states in the Eastern Bloc because he claimed the Soviet Union had to fear Western Europe and had to fear another aggression from them. Are you saying that at this point Moscow no longer fears from the West, no longer believes that aggression from the West is possible?
Well, it's not that simple. We believe that there is a much greater opportunity now to emphasize political things and to ensure our security by political means and to develop good political relations with the West and to bring over a situation where there will be no need to be afraid of military aggression from the East or from the West. And we feel that the common European home is the right direction to go.
Well, I'm sorry, please. What is this common European home? What is the final shape of this home?
Of course, it is a developing concept, but basically it is a place where all Europeans will feel, and that will include, of course, also the United States and Canada, will feel that they are members of the same family, that they don't have to fear each other, that they can interact freely among themselves, and that the borders, as we knew them 50 years ago, 100 years ago, do not really divide nations, but rather unite them.
You know, in 1992, the EEC hopes to take gigantic steps toward one common home. Are you saying that you think the nations of Eastern Europe, indeed the Soviet Union, one day will have that kind of alliance where borders are practically down, where a common currency is used, where there are no tariffs and trade is very free?
Well, maybe something of this kind. It's difficult at this point to draw direct parallels between what's going to happen in Western Europe in 1992 and what the future of the whole Europe will be, but definitely we are thinking in terms of unity rather than division.
And no Warsaw Pact, no Warsaw Pact and no NATO, and how quickly would that come about?
Well, we have been proposing again and again that the two blocs be disbanded, and the Warsaw Pact is not something without which we cannot see the world. Of course, NATO will also have to go.
George, we got about a minute.
Two very quick questions. You use the language of freedom of choice. Is East Germany, in Soviet view, free to choose to leave the Warsaw Pact?
Well, it's important to realize that the members of the Warsaw Pact stay there not because of the Soviet pressure, but because on the basis of their view of their national interests and the interests of the stability in Europe.
So
and all of them have been saying lately that they intend to stay with the Warsaw Pact. That applies to all countries.
The revolutionary principle of 1989 seems to be open borders between nations. When will the Soviet border be as open as those of the East European nations have become?
What do you mean by open borders?
Freedom to
if
travel.
you mean the freedom of travel, of course, as you know, we have had a lot of progress in that respect, and people can leave the country quite freely these days for travel and for good if they choose to. And of course, there is also going to be a special legislation passed shortly, which will provide a firm legal basis for that sort of thing. We do intend very firmly to comply with the provisions of the Vienna Accords to that effect.
Mr. Churkin, thank you. Thanks very much for coming in today and talking with us.
Thank you.
Pleased to have you with us. Coming next, the Secretary of State, James A. Baker. In a moment. Mr. Secretary, thanks for coming in today.
Thank you, David.
Very glad to have you with us. I know you've been busy lately, and we want to find out what you've been busy about as far as you're willing to tell us. The term historic is certainly overused, but I think what is happening in East Germany, West Germany, is A, historic, and B, tumultuous. What is the U.S. policy toward all this?
Well, first of all, let me say that I agree with you, and we have characterized these events as dramatic and significant and remarkable, and by some we are accused of not reacting in an enthusiastic enough way. I'd like to put that to rest because we agree with your characterization. At the same time,
the president that people thought did not react with sufficient enthusiasm, wasn't it?
Well, but I think the president made it clear that he was very enthusiastic yesterday as well. The policy, of course, is to continue to encourage this move toward openness in Eastern Europe, the move toward openness and reform as well in the Soviet Union. To do so in a way that doesn't seek unilateral advantage, and to do so in a way that doesn't promote instability. That's the policy that we've been pursuing since the administration took office, certainly since the president went to Poland and Hungary, and we firmly believe it's the right policy.
Policy is to encourage it, help it. How do we do that?
Support it, encourage it, help it. Well, in the case of the Soviet Union, we help it by working with them to promote and create a stable international environment. That means working toward solving some regional conflicts, and we're not making all the progress there we'd like to make. It also means progress in arms control. It means working with the Soviet Union to assist them where we can with technical economic advice in their efforts to move to a free market economy. With respect to Eastern Europe, it means welcoming steps such as this, progress such as this, but not overreacting to it and not doing so in a manner that would seek to take unilateral advantage or in any way encourage instability.
Hungary and Poland are one kind of asset to the Soviet Union. East Germany has always been something very different in terms of materiel and its frontline status. Where, if anywhere, is the limit of Soviet tolerance of change in East Germany? Where might they draw the line, and how might they draw it?
Well, I think you may have heard it in your questions to the previous guest. I think the limit is is Warsaw Pact membership, at least for the time being.
But he did say that they were, technically, he said they're here of their own free will and can leave.
That is true. And at the same time, I think he also made it very clear that it was a little bit too early, in their view, to be talking about reunification and things like that. So you ask me where I think the line is right now. I think the line is Warsaw Pact membership.
The second half of my question was, if that's the line, how might they draw it? That is, is it feasible for them to threaten or contemplate the use of force against the peoples of Eastern Europe?
They have made it very clear to us in private conversations, and they have confirmed this publicly, that they will not use force in Eastern Europe. To do so, they say, would mean that perestroika has failed. We've said for a number of months that we believe that. Others have not believed it. I think that what's happening today in East Germany tends to confirm the accuracy of our belief.
It is politeness and de rigueur for everyone to say in public in the West that a united Germany is welcome. However, a united Germany has been nothing but trouble in the 20th century. Are you absolutely sanguine about the possibility of a united Germany in the center of Europe?
I think the way we should approach that question, George, is to recognize that this has been or it's been the policy of the United States and the Allies for a long, long time.
But as long as it was not possible.
Well, no, not really. As long as it is achieved in peace and freedom, and as long as that reunification comes about on the basis of Western values. But it is, in my view at least, premature to jump, to make the great leap, and it is a big leap, from right of free travel on the part of East Germans to the question of reunification. There are many things, it seems to me, that have to take place in between. One of those is fair and free and even multi-party elections in East Germany. Another is movement toward a free economic system, free markets, free enterprise. So it's premature in my sense to take this event, which is indeed historic, and we have characterized it as the most significant event in East-West relations in 40 years, but to make the jump from that to the question of the reunification of Germany.
Of course, as you know, one of the reasons President Bush is accused of being timid or cautious is because the United States seems to always be trailing these events, and even when they occur, takes an inordinate period of time, as in Poland, to decide to do something about it, that is, to help. Let me ask you about East Germany. Is there any plan now to aid Krentz or East Germany, one and the same at the moment, in any economic sense, any political sense, or any sense?
Well, I think there is assistance in the political sense just by virtue of the manner in which the United States is reacting to this change. In addition to that, we are doing some things in terms of communication that I don't want to go into in a whole lot of detail here. We're talking to people behind the scenes. But in terms of economic assistance, it would be wrong to have a different standard for East Germany than we do for Poland and Hungary.
Why?
Because we want to see reform progress. We want to see change progress. It would be wrong to start funneling economic assistance to any country in Eastern Europe, I think, even if we had it to funnel, and we are somewhat constrained in what we can do, before there is clear evidence that they want to reform their economic system. What we have here is a rather significant event in political terms, but it doesn't mean a whole lot in economic terms.
Why doesn't President Bush...
I'm sorry, let me interrupt briefly, and I'll come right back to you. We will be back with more questions for the Secretary of State in a moment. Sam?
I was just about to ask you, Mr. Secretary, why doesn't President Bush do something dramatic, such as offer to meet with Egon Krentz, the East German leader?
Well, at some point that might be appropriate. It isn't right now. That would be, I think, premature. I noted the early part of your show when you were asking Peter there at the wall, what do you think should be done? And I think his comment was, leave it to the Germans. We're, I think, doing more than simply leaving it to the Germans, but this is not the time for President Bush to be meeting with the East German leader. It is the time for Chancellor Kohl to be meeting with him, and he is going to meet with him after consulting with his allies.
Go ahead, George.
The deficit and a decade of pent-up demands for social spending in this country have people salivating over the defense budget. And now the Graham-Rudman sequester requires program-by-program reductions, half of them coming out of the defense budget. Troop cuts is the issue. What would you say to people on Congress who said, look, the rationale for having the current level of U.S. troops in Europe is antiquated. They should come home in large numbers. What would you say?
I would say, first of all, that for us to take unilateral action in that regard completely undermines our efforts to negotiate a good conventional forces agreement with the Soviets. And we've put a good proposal on the table that would result in bringing 30,000 troops out of Europe. It's a good proposal. We think there's some chance that we'll get agreement with the Soviets if we keep pushing it. We won't get it if unilaterally we take them out. We won't be able to negotiate anything. That's number one. The second thing I would say is the reason the wall's coming down is because we have maintained our resolve and our will and our strength for 40 years. And let's don't jump here before it's time to jump. There may be, yes, if these developments continue, we might be able to cut back even more significantly than we have, but we've been cutting back significantly in defense spending over the last few years. We may be able to cut back even more. But let's don't be premature about it. Let's don't do it before it's time to do it.
Mr. Sinclair, George, go ahead.
Well, how do you turn to Congress and say B-2, Midget Man, MX, and they say, what's the threat? It's very hard for the layman to perceive a threat in the Soviet Union at the moment.
Well, that may be true, but the Soviet Union still remains a very heavily armed superpower. Now, politically, the Soviet Union is saying and acting in a way that does indeed make it harder to argue the threat. But the threat itself, in terms of military power, is still there. So we really should not disarm, if you will, until the time comes to do so in light of actual Soviet actions.
Mr. Secretary, there's a report this morning in the Washington Post quoting U.S. officials, I don't know if you were one of them or not, they were not named, saying that the Russians have cut back on their spending for modernizing nuclear weapons, building a submarine, I believe, and some other weapons.
Mm-hmm.
Can you
I was
enlighten us on that?
I was not one of them.
I figured you weren't, but tell us what you can.
Your job is safe.
As far as I know, that has not been established. We do believe that the Soviets are, in keeping with what they have told us, reducing their production of conventional weapons. But as yet, we do not have firm evidence, in my opinion, that they have begun reducing their expenditures for strategic weapons. They may have. We may be able to establish that later. Right now, I don't think we've established.
Secretary, as you know, for the first time in 8 or 9 years, there's intense guerrilla fighting in El Salvador, in the capital, San Salvador. What can you tell us about that, and how dangerous is it?
Well, I can tell you that as far as we know this morning, the American community there is accounted for. That is the Americans resident in El Salvador and the diplomats and military people that we have there. I can tell you that I believe there has been one American casualty, a school teacher.
Killed?
Killed. There are no other American casualties as far as I know. I can tell you that this appears to be an action that the insurgency in El Salvador, the FMLN, has undertaken, a rather desperate action in my view, to disrupt the negotiations that they were having with the government towards seeking a political accommodation.
But you do not believe that this is the beginning of any major offensive that threatens to destabilize the government?
I don't think it threatens to destabilize the government of El Salvador, because I think the government of El Salvador can handle this militarily and defensively, but it is a major offensive action by the FMLN, by the insurgents.
With regard to this kind of regional conflict, Paul Wolfowitz of the Defense Department recently gave a rather sharp speech in which he said, with regard to regional conflicts, Soviet behavior really has not changed measurably.
So did Jim Baker. If you read my speech here recently, you'll see that I said the same thing.
But you're considered to be a moderate.
I know. But the truth of the matter is, as I just mentioned a moment ago, we're disappointed in reality versus rhetoric in terms of regional conflicts.
When you get to Malta and talk to the gentleman who says we're desperate for cash and we need your help, and our main goal of the Soviet Union is to raise the standard of living of our people. Will you condition American aid on a substantial reduction of their subsidies to Cuba and Nicaragua?
Well, they won't ask us for American cash. They haven't yet. They've said they're not going to, and I don't believe we'll see that in Malta. Technical economic advice is what we're talking about, not American financial assistance. But we will do the same thing we have been doing ever since we came into office, and that I have done personally in the ministerial meetings I have had with Shevardnadze, which is to say, if you expect cooperation from us, if you expect us to move from competition through dialogue to cooperation, we need to see cooperation in Central America, for instance. And they are taking some steps there. They're not sufficient. They are beginning to do some things. So far, they haven't been sufficient.
Mr. Secretary, Israeli Prime Minister Shamir will be here on Wednesday to see the President and you. Now, he's asked you for 6 assurances so that he can go forward with some sort of a negotiation. And with the Palestinian delegation, he wants at least 2, that there'll be no PLO members on it, and that Israel will retain a veto over the members of that delegation. Will you give him those assurances?
Those are stated a little bit definitive, a little bit more definitively, Sam, than they came in. Let me simply say that we have received the so-called assumptions. The Israeli cabinet accepted our 5 points, our 5-point framework in principle, and they said we do so on the basis of 6 assumptions. We're studying those assumptions. They're a lot more detailed than that. We will be responding in due course. We will also be responding to the request of Egypt for certain clarifications of the 5 points. So that process is going on.
But do you think that you're going to get a negotiation out of this?
We're working at it.
But you can't predict it.
As long as there's any hope in the Middle East peace process, you've got to keep plugging away. Small steps. Small steps.
Mr. Secretary, I wish we had more time, so come again, will you?
Thank you, David.
Thanks very much for being here today. It's been a pleasure to have you with us. Coming next, our discussion here, with argument always possible, and joining us will be Tom Wicker, columnist for the New York Times. In a moment. We've seen this week a series of truly stunning events. We've heard a great number of opinions from others, officials, private persons, and so on. I'd like to hear ours. George, what do you think about all this?
Well, I don't think there's ever been a year remotely like this in human history. We have communist regimes governing 1.5 billion people in simultaneous crisis. And we have in live, active, consequential debate around the world all the fundamental categories of political thought: freedom, justice, equality, representation, consent, legitimacy, constitutionalism, rule of law, all of them. I mean, it's an enormous global seminar, and I can't imagine a more stimulating time to be alive.
It's as if Thomas Jefferson were with us again.
Well, the third American president is governing the world at the moment. Jefferson's language right now is on a billion lips.
We saw it in China last month.
Right.
Same.
Well, not only is this taking place, it's taking place with the speed of light. I mean, the Secretary of State says, quite naturally, that certain things are premature, but premature now is measured in 48-hour increments. I noticed in the paper this morning someone 2 weeks ago saying, yes, the wall will come down, but not in my lifetime. That person is still alive. I think what needs to be done is that the United States now needs to kind of seize the initiative rather than sort of wait along and go along and let everybody else do it. I think the United States ought to come in the forefront with all of these emerging nations and give them whatever help we can.
Do you think diplomatic habits were formed in the days of the sailing ship when it took a month to get a message to Europe?
Well, yes, and there's a great fear, and I think there's some justification about doing something that is sudden and that you regret later. But I think you can be too cautious when something like this is occurring, and I think we are at the moment.
Tom?
Well, other than for the fact that, in reply to George, I think there were some other important years, 1492, for example, but I certainly agree with the general estimate of the magnitude and the stunning proportions of what's happening today. I think, however, that, and somewhat in response to Sam, I'm not sure this is a moment for the United States at least to appear to be seizing an issue, and because I think, as the Secretary said, that would begin to appear to be exploitation, almost as if gloating in triumph, and it doesn't seem to me that that is particularly the right approach that we should take. Furthermore, I think that we should float. Despite all of our rejoicing over these events, and we certainly should rejoice, And it seems to me there remains an element of danger in it, and we've touched on it here. It's been touched on in this program this morning because we can't know how far these events will go. I think it was George said several times that events are outrunning anybody's plans for them. So that whatever we may think here, the people in East Germany and West Germany may just simply be going beyond what statesmen can control. And there's an element of danger in that.
Well, what would be wrong, Tom, with President Bush meeting the new East German leader, Egon Krenz?
Well, I don't know that there would be anything wrong with it, but what would be achieved by it?
I'll tell you what would be wrong with it. That is, it would be indicating that the United States is somehow the Toscanini of this symphony. And in fact, the glorious thing about this is that it's a lot of...
John Foster Dulles is not alive. We didn't do anything
that is
about
precisely my point, and that's why the Donaldson Doctrine, which is that we ought to seize the initiative, strikes me as quaint. I mean, an entire population of Eastern Europe has seized the initiative. This is a very good time for the United States to do what it has absolutely no choice but to do, which is stand there and marvel.
Well, the United States consistently is behind the curve on these events.
These events may turn sour here in the next year or so. I mean, it's possible. I'm not predicting that. I hope that doesn't happen, but it certainly is possible in what it is almost to be described as a stampede. You don't exactly know which way a stampede might turn out.
Well, in their private conversations, the Soviet leaders talking to our leaders have asked seriously that we not take advantage of their withdrawal from this place and that place and that place to make them look bad. And I think we have agreed that we won't. Isn't that a factor in this?
Well, how can you make the Soviet Union look bad? The Soviet Union is a basket case. There's nothing more we can do. With a rose on the grave of communism? Well, I mean, I just don't understand why. It's not like Henry Kissinger saying to the North Vietnamese, give us a decent interval, and then, of course, Saigon is gone.
Sam, it's been said in this program many times, when the Soviets, not the East Germans, when the Soviets permit the wall to come down, then we'll begin to believe the Soviets are responsible, that they are beginning to take
the Soviets did this? They destabilized
I'm trying to say, it's been said here many times, that when that happens, we'll finally begin to believe that reform in the Soviet Union is a real thing. Well, the wall is coming down. Maybe it's time we began to believe that reform in the Soviet Union is a real thing. And for that, Mr. Gorbachev surely must get some credit.
Well, you're arguing my case, I think. If you extend it and say, the old question we've debated here many times, should the United States help Gorbachev? Is it in our interest to see Gorbachev and Perestroika survive? I think it is.
Well, of course.
George, you're the Secretary of State. What do you do?
Well, I think you tell them that, in fact, we have a certain set of criteria for the next step along the way. This is not moving the goalposts.
Ending the shipping of money to Central America.
Well, I should think that's partly it. But basically what we want is the institutionalization of pluralism, multi-party systems in Eastern Europe. After that, the people of Eastern Europe can take care of themselves. These are ancient cultures with traditions.
Absolutely.
And the whole drama of the 20th century is we're seeing the 15th, 16th, 17th, 18th, and 19th centuries come back. The durable civil society of Eastern Europe.
George,
let it flourish.
This winter, everyone says think it's going to be an awful winter, and Poland, Moscow, these people don't have enough coal, they don't have enough heat. What should we do? Just sit back and let events take its course? Whatever number of you may die of the cold, that's the way it works out?
Sam, there's lots of food in Poland, as a matter of fact.
Right. And what's Bush meeting with Krenz got to do with coal in the Soviet Union?
Well, that would be a symbolic gesture, as well as perhaps laying the groundwork.
It would be a very
relations.
symbolic gesture, just as George suggests, that somehow we have triumphed in Germany and in Eastern Europe, and it doesn't seem to me that this is the time we ought to be saying to the Soviet Union, aha, we've triumphed and you've lost.
Well, I don't think we'd be saying that at all. I don't think when you meet with someone like Krenz, you're rubbing it into the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union destabilized Honecker. Gorbachev in that visit 3 weeks ago.
Before we
undercut him.
Before we go, we got 2 minutes. We can talk about Berlin more next week. In the meantime, we've had some elections in this country, in Virginia, New Jersey, and New York, and some interesting things took place. We elected a black governor in Virginia for the first time, a black mayor in New York for the first time, and the Republicans took a beating. What do we make of that, Sam?
Well, of course, the losers all say all politics is local, but the winners say there's a national trend. Certainly, the Republicans can't be happy, whether it's the abortion issue or whether it's the fact that there was not a basic realignment to conservatism, George, forgive me, in this country over the years of Reaganism. The Democrats won everywhere, not just where you mentioned, but in Seattle.
Why?
Well, I think it was abortion, at least two of the contests.
Was it abortion?
Well, I think abortion certainly helped. I mean, the Democratic stand on that in Virginia and New Jersey. But what I think is really truly significant here is that polls aside, is what you said in the beginning. The first American state has elected a black governor. It happened to be a southern state. That's astonishing. The biggest and most complex American city has elected a black mayor. That's astonishing. And it doesn't matter whether it's 1/10 of 1% or 10%. It's astonishing. And that's happened. And in terms of our national politics, it's equally astonishing with what's happening in Eastern Europe, in my judgment.
Are you astonished, George?
I'm quite astonished. I'm pleased at the evidence of the plasticity of American life with regard to the rising of black politicians. Two problems coming up. Jesse Jackson now must look around and see that there are lots of other responsible, office-holding black leaders, so he cannot wag the Democratic Party quite so much. And the Democratic Party in convention assembled in 1992 will have a moderate governor of Virginia who is black, who represents the largest loyal bloc in the Democratic Party.
What happened to the conservative? I'm sorry, the time is up. Time is up. We're running late. We'll be back with a word or two about how one small country, almost by itself, has turned East Germany upside down. In a moment. Finally, a word about the Hungarians' role in opening the wall. Remember that Hungary never was communist anyway until the Soviet Union forced it on them in 1947. It's been a Catholic country for 1,000 years and regards itself as the easternmost Western country. And so it was the first of the Russian satellites in 1956 to mount an open revolt put down by Russian tanks in a scene of bravery, blood, and death. Then East Germany found its skilled people were slipping out, going to the west. Nikita Khrushchev, then the boss, said, "The blood was running out of our veins," and he ordered the wall built. So the East Germans were trapped until this year, when Hungary declared itself a republic and no longer a people's republic controlled by Moscow. This fall, the word got out that if the East Germans could get themselves to Hungary, which they could, the Hungarians would let them pass on through into West Germany. So many thousands took this route, not over the wall, but around it. It was clear the wall now was useless, thanks to the Hungarians. Their contribution to this history should be remembered. Tonight, ABC News will present a special program called Freedom Weekend with Peter Jennings reporting live from West Berlin. That's tonight at 7 o'clock Eastern Time. For all of us at ABC News, until next week, thank you.
This has been a presentation of ABC News, where more Americans get their news than from any other source.